Hello. Hi, can everyone hear me? That's great. Excellent. All right. Welcome to our event. Good morning, bom dia. Welcome to Brazil. I'm Brazilian, so through international courts. That's the title of this event. And I am the moderator. And the main thing that we are going to discuss are the advisory opinions on climate change. And as you know, this year we had an advisory opinion from the highest court of the UN, the International Court of Justice, on what climate means from a perspective of human rights. Also last year's, the years before, we had an advisory opinion from ITLOS, the International Law of the Sea, on climate as well, and the Inter-American Court of Human Rights also issued an advisory opinion. The African Court of Human Rights will issue an advisory opinion the next year. So this is a movement together with more than 3,000 lawsuits. So litigation, the legal part of the system is taking climate action, which is fascinating. I'm a lawyer by my profession and focused on international environmental law, so it's also fascinating for me. But I'm not the panelist today. Those are my panelists. But before I introduce them, I would like to say that those opinions, they bring lots of hope for me because we are in very difficult times. We just learned that, the limit of 1.5 might be breached, and we need to go back to that limit as soon as possible. We are on the brink of tipping points as well. For example, the coral reefs tipping points, we are about to lose our coral reefs. And this is a very difficult COP for geopolitical reasons. So the ICJ advisory opinion brings hope in the process, brings hope that, the broader system is looking at climate change issues, and brings hopes that ideas can become to reality as well. I don't know if you know the story of the ICJ advisory opinion, but it's really beautiful. It comes from a classroom in the Pacific. Students created a challenge and they created a campaign, and then governments embraced the campaign all the way through the ICJ, which is the highest court in the UN. So ideas can become reality. We need to have ideas and believe our ideas. So with this framing, I will introduce my panelists. So I have Manuel Pulgar Vidal, my boss, the most important qualification. No, just kidding. He is, of course, the leader for climate and energy, for the climate and energy practice at WWF. He is an IUCN chair of the IUCN Climate Action Commission. It used to be Climate Crisis, but became Climate Action Commission. And he's also a former COP president of COP20 in Lima and Peru. And we also have with us Anna Heslop. She's the Regional Director of European Programs at ClientEarth. So without further delay, I will go to the question. And the first question is for you, Manuel. So from an international perspective, this ruling signal and set a new framework for action. So how can this legal momentum translate here into the COP, into stronger ambition, accountability, under, the global action plan we want to see coming out of this very COP?
Thank you, Fernanda. My apologies. I am also a lawyer by training, but I am not the Lincoln lawyer. I don't have a Lincoln. I am an environmental lawyer. So let's go into Fernanda's question. Let's always think on this kind of strong achievement, all these opinions, Inter-American Court of Human Rights, the ITLOS one, the ICJ, in a systemic way. And let's take those lessons to go into Fernanda's question. First, let's start by recognizing that all of this climate system, it has been created in a voluntary basis. You remember that when we were discussing the Paris Agreement, we were thinking, okay, how can we do that? Non-legally binding, what does it mean? How weak it could be? But look, friends, even as lawyer, it is not that by being non-legally or legally binding or by being soft law or hard law, it's extremely different, that the soft law it is so weak. No, that is not true. Sometimes, as it was with the Rio Declaration in 92, those kinds of instruments are extremely able to move the needle. Even more when courts come into the debate. And that is what probably it is the most significant achievement when it is about these opinions by courts. So that is my first reflection. And Fernanda brought this idea of all behind of these opinions. It has been a fantastic story. And it is true because in case of the ICJ, the fact that it was started by a group of young people, young lawyers from Vanuatu, no? Vanuatu, and then their country moved it into the assembly, and then the assembly asked for the opinion to the ICJ, shows how much is possible to move step by step those process towards getting and achieving what we expected that it would be. And also that is fantastic because even you are a tiny country, even economically you are not in the list of the tops, even you are so vulnerable as it is Vanuatu, even you are a young guy, young lawyer working for achieving something, it's always possible. And every piece of this effort counts. So that is why even this small pavilion counts, that one counts, and for me, that is part of this fantastic process. The third element, it is more related to what courts have already mentioned. Clear identification of duties. In case of the ICA, clear identification on what does it mean to breach your own obligations as you are not fulfilling with your own duties. So, again, I am a lawyer, and for me, the legal logic behind the opinion of the ICA, wow, it is so well structured. But even in case of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, they have identified first the climate emergency in a very, if you don't need to be well updated on what are the sources to identify that we are in a climate emergency, go and read the IACtHR. It is not opinion, I don't remember the title. It's an advisory opinion. Go and read that one. But after that identification of the climate emergency, also they have recognized something that it is very important for this forum. It is not just about the 92 Convention on Climate Change. It is not just about Kyoto or even Paris Agreement. It is a whole set of multilateral decisions that can contribute to identify the relations in between and to identify that we are in an emergency. Even the ILO, that it is about jobs and for sure indigenous people's rights. Many other treaties, agreements, pacts, among some others, that have contributed to move that forward. But let me add something else, because this is a fireside chat and I am talking as a speaker and I am not. But let me add something in case of the IACtHR. The leapfrog of recognizing that, yeah, it is true, we have the right for a healthy environment. And again, probably Anna can go into that. It has been a long journey to have the right for a healthy environment being recognized by the UN system as a fundamental right. I think that it was in 2022, no? So 3 years ago. But in Peru, my country, we got the recognition of that fundamental right in the 1979 Constitution. So globally, it took like decades, and that's part of the processes. But what it has been the leapfrog, that now the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, it is saying, yes, we have the right for a healthy environment, but now we have the right for a healthy climate. And you can't imagine what does it mean. And again, don't be stressed. It is not that because of those opinions, tomorrow the world will change, no, and everything will be marvelous. No, it will take time. But it is in our hands. It depends on us that we can move that future development and future progress ahead, that we can face the new challenges by having, last comment, the third leg of a system. We have the political one, we have the economic one, that it is a transition, and now we have the legal one. And that leg is fantastic to push our action forward.
Yeah, I think this is great. I mean, this perspective that, it's not going to change the world automatically. And I was in a conversation about the advisory opinion yesterday that was so interesting that, someone mentioned the Pacific student that it doesn't only create obligations for countries, it creates obligation for people and for us to use it and make use of it. So I think that's also a great perspective. But now I wanted to change to a more European perspective. You are the regional director of a legal organization for Europe. So in your view, how do you see that impacting your legal work in Europe, speaking in terms of advocacy and litigation?
Thank you. So, and thank you very much for having me. It's really interesting to kind of be here and be part of this discussion. I think we've seen a kind of increasing amount of climate litigation over the last few years. As you said, we now have more than 3,000 pieces of climate litigation globally. And these advisory opinions are sort of the cherry on top of that cake, I think. And we do hear, it's not legally binding. But what these advisory opinions do is they clarify and they consolidate existing legal duties. And we can take those into courts around the world and use them, and they're already being used. So the Climate Change Legal Initiative have been tracking some of this, and the advisory opinion from the ICJ is already being cited in court by plaintiffs, but also by judges. There was a case here in Brazil just in August, so only like a month after this came out, where the court actually mentioned the ICJ advisory opinion. So we can use that in our litigation, and we should. It's in our power as civil society to take these things and to go around when we're making legal arguments, to really think about using these in our legal arguments. In terms of the kind of advocacy that we do, part of what these advisory opinions say, so just to kind of run through it for those who are not sort of well versed in them, the ITLOS one said that states are legally obliged to reduce emissions and that historical emitters bear most responsibility. The Inter-American Court of Human Rights said states must regulate and monitor corporate emissions, and that tackling climate disinformation is one of the state duties. And then the ICJ said governments have to regulate the climate impacts of business, and that state conduct, such as fossil fuel production, consumption, licensing and subsidies, run counter to those legal obligations. So that's a really strong set of things that we can use, not only in our advocacy but also in our litigation, to kind of make those arguments. And I was at another event yesterday. I think this advisory opinion is being discussed everywhere, but I was at an event where Carol Moffat from File was talking about, he had been tracking, after the ICJ advisory opinion came out, tracking advice that law firms were giving kind of publicly to their clients. And he said they are telling their corporate clients, this changes the game for you. You need to take this into account. So if corporate law firms are advising their clients of that, that's a big sign for us to say we need to be telling the corporates, this is a change, this is a game changer. This is a moment where the health of people and the planet becomes a legal imperative, and it's a kind of justice is taking root here. You need to be along with this process because it's coming whether you like it or not.
So that's amazing. I mean, when I hear that the ICJ advisory opinion is already being cited into lawsuits, that's music to my ears, and that firms are giving advice to corporates on this, I think that's really, really great. So Manuel, I just want to talk now about a different advisory opinion, but equally important from a perspective of WWF. We also work with oceans very much. So what are the implications of the ITLOS, the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea advisory opinion, and what that means for the ocean, especially after the UN Conference on Oceans, where a blue NDC challenge was issued, and we were very happy about it. It's an effort to bring oceans to NDCs. And ahead of the BBNJ, this is the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdictions Agreement. So if you can comment on that a bit. No, I'm not giving you the mic, just kidding.
Thank you, Fernanda. Anna mentioned something so important. All of these opinions have changed the game. And that is so, so important because look, even before of these opinions, we had already had some good court decisions. One related to Germany to have them raising ambition through their NDC, some related to Dutch courts to move Shell to be more clear on their targets in relation to net zero, among some others. Even there are some pending one. Is this that it was started by a campesino, Peruvian campesino from the Andes of Peru, against an energy company, the largest generation company in Germany, no, based in Germany. So we have already seen the role of courts, and for sure we know how much more it will be dynamized because of this kind of opinion. And let me say something based in my own experience in environmental law. Historically, used to be courts that moved the needle. I remember that in case of this right for a healthy environment, in case of Peru and many Latin American countries, it was mostly because court decisions. And that is why new text of our constitution finally adopted it in Article 1 or 2, that means more relevant, more related to fundamental rights and all of that. Moving into Fernanda's question, remember that we used to think legally our obligations as individuals, but even as states, in a jurisdictional way. No? So, okay, I am under the rules of Peru, you are under the rule of Brazil, and etc. But now we are facing planetary challenges that are global, in which to point at anybody to say, okay, you are the main source and you are the causing, it's so difficult. So we do need to have over jurisdictional ways of dealing with the problem. And that is why also the importance of these opinions, but are more broader than just a single jurisdiction. And look, when it is about ocean, it is even more difficult. Because in some way, because of the question, Fernanda is recognizing that we have agreements for our jurisdictional oceans, and we have agreement for our non-jurisdictional ocean. That means beyond national jurisdiction, the BBNJ. And that is so important because can you imagine a border in the middle of the ocean? It's impossible, no? It is not the acidification of the ocean finished in the 12-mile or in the 200-mile. It is the ocean as a whole ecosystem that it is affected because of the acidification. And even the acidification, it is something that it has been recognized by the court, by ITLOS, in sense of defining what are those obligations when it is about on who is emitting, who is not fulfilling with their own obligation, that it is creating acidification of the ocean, that it is having social and economic consequences. So I think that not only this ITLOS opinion, but all the others are contributing to this new global view, global approach to these problems by using the courts. And that is why it is so important what we are currently discussing. And even more, and let me finish with this, when it is about oceans, that in the climate debate, it is fortunately getting more traction, but still deserve more attention. No, oceans, again, because of the lack of jurisdiction in most of our oceans, are not as important piece or part of what it should be the role in the climate debate. And oceans, it is key socially, economically related to climate change. Climate change, it is being exacerbated mostly because of what it is happening with sea currents. The sea currents are the ones who are defining the state of climate. So we do need to look what it is happening in the North Atlantic because of this slower of the, I don't remember the name, no, of this interchange of current. So all of those things are happening in ocean. So ITLOS, it is giving us a good pillar to continue moving our action forward in favor of oceans and for sure some other ecosystems.
Thank you, Manuel. So that was ITLOS. Now, for you, Anna, I want to go a bit into the Inter-American Court advisory opinion and two very important points that you already raised, but I wanted to build upon a little bit. the advisory opinion from the International Court of the Inter-American Court emphasized the duty to regulate corporate emissions, you already mentioned that, and also to combat climate disinformation. So how do you see that influencing domestic accountability and domestic legislation mechanisms?
Yeah. So the question of climate disinformation and misinformation has been kind of quite a hot topic this week. President Lula mentioned it on Monday. There's a declaration, I think, yesterday about it. It's a really significant threat to our ability to be able to tackle climate change, right? And so that finding from the Inter-American Court is super useful. And it sort of carries through, I think, into the ICJ advisory opinion, because the ICJ advisory opinion, it says that the responsibility doesn't arise from the conduct of private actors and companies, it arises from the state's failure to regulate that conduct. And so states have a responsibility to regulate the conduct of private actors, including companies that are pushing disinformation, tech companies that are allowing, their algorithms push the most salacious things up onto your feed, and so you will get things that are the most controversial, and they tend to be things that are not true, right? You get the less factual information because it's more clickable, and so tackling some of those practices by private companies is something that needs to come through in the legislation of different governments around the world. At ClientEarth, we produced a report yesterday. We published a report yesterday looking at the disinformation, the sort of social media regulations in the EU, and how climate disinformation can be tackled using those rules. I'm not sure whether the European Commission will agree with us that that's what they intended those rules for, but we've read the law and we think it can be used for that. And so, we need to go after the social media companies and get them to look at their algorithms and things as well as looking at the companies themselves. There are avenues for this. Yeah.
All right, good. So we know more now about ITLOS, about the Inter-American Court opinion. So now let's talk about people. After all, those advisory opinions are meant to protect people. And Manuel, you signed an op-ed on the people's talk. And a key objective of this talk is connecting the climate regime to people's lives. So how do you see those advisory opinions and developing into key proposals to make sure we integrate them with the voices and the demands of the citizens?
Look, this idea has just popped up in my mind, based on my own experience, because in Lima, when I was president of COP20, we launched the Action Agenda, fantastic idea, so instrumental for the current time, in which mostly the business sector has been so instrumental, fantastic, by defining transitions, pledges, targets, standards, and all of that. Let's continue pushing that forward. For me, that is a fantastic way. And look, in some way, these opinions that are related to rights, and rights are related to us, to people, should frame our people action agenda in some way, because it is about on defending rights of people, even more the most vulnerable people. So I think that we can work on that. We can work on how this means for a citizen, what does it mean for a citizen to have this level of recognition of their own rights as fundamental rights? And what are those kind of actions that a citizen could move as a way to force to have decision makers, government authorities, multilateral level or domestic level, being able to fulfill with their own obligation. So that is for me so important, because look, if we go into each one, not each one, some of those opinions, the ICJ, when it is identifying what are those duties of states, is the duty to prevent significant harm to the environment with due diligence. Due diligence, it is also interesting. The duty to cooperate. And in the case of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, it is to respect rights, to guarantee or secure rights, and to cooperate and to adopt internal measures to deal with the problem. So it's clear what does it mean for a state to fulfill with their own obligations, their duties. The point it is, what if not? The second part it is, what is the role of citizens when somebody is breaching those obligations, is not fulfilling with those obligations? So it is extremely connected to people ask for that. Remember, and last phrase, this is about human rights. It's human rights. And that is so important. Let me finish by saying, I always say, let me finish and never finish, but okay. I promise that now I'm going to finish. Let me finish by saying, I used to be critic because of the environmental law against human rights law. You know why? Because I think that in some way the environmental lawyers did a mistake. We made our environmental law framework too much instrumental, in sense being, what is the word? Being confirmed by mechanism. Okay, do you have an environmental impact assessment? Check. Do you have this instrument? Check. And that is not the way. In some way, the environmental law used to forget people. Now, when we are connecting this environmental side, climate for sure, with human rights, we are moving the law more to the people. And that is something that we have to explore, what you as an environmental lawyer, what it should be the next step. No, to recognize that by being part of the human rights system and vice versa, because both sides can get benefits of working more closer together, and that would be fantastic for people around the world.
Okay, so now I want to talk about a hot subject, and it's really hot because, as you know, we're going to talk about fossil fuels. They are 80% of global emissions, the main cause of climate change, and even a cause of biodiversity loss as well, because fossil fuels affect biodiversity in direct and indirect ways. And it's a big topic of discussion, not in a specific track, but you know, is the whole rationale behind COPs. And since 2023, the world has agreed to transition away from fossil fuels. And you know, I consider the International Court of Justice opinion revolutionary or seismic in the sense that it talks about fossil fuel subsidies, consumption, and production as possible breaches of international law. So, I mean, what kind of message does this send to the economies that continue to explore fossil fuels, or how do you see the ICJ opinion influencing, you know, exploitation of fossil fuels?
Yeah, so it's absolutely brilliant, that bit of the judgment, because fossil fuels, we are starting to move away from them because they are becoming less economically viable in many places than renewables, right? But the reason that people continue to dig them out of the ground is because of subsidies. And governments continue to subsidize them, which means that they continue to be profitable. So the court actually saying subsidies are one of the breaches of the law is really, really strong. And there's a lot of work going on to kind of try and challenge some of those subsidies. We have a case which we won in the European Court of Justice just last week, where we managed to challenge agricultural subsidies and challenge France's agricultural plan, which is the first time anybody's managed to sort of challenge one of those against the European Commission. And the European Commission's been told to go away and look again at France's plan and not approve it. So we can do similar things when it comes to fossil fuel subsidies, right? We can start to challenge governments using this new sort of decision. And I think there's also something in there about that corporate responsibility that I was talking about. You know, this is stuff that doesn't make any sense. It stopped being logical to dig this stuff out of the ground, and it stops over time. I mean, there's the big fossil fuel producers will keep clinging to it, but at some point it stops making economic sense for them as well. And if the subsidies disappear, then hopefully that will be a kind of big sign to them. So I think we can use it in that way, and it's really strong. And the other thing I wanted to say about the ICJ opinion is, what's really nice about it is it's unanimous. So they can make opinions by consensus. It's unanimous, which means every single judge on that court agreed with it. And that's a really strong signal internationally.
Yeah, and also many other aspects, talking about, you know, the duty to repair, restore, compensate, so many other things, like, for example, acknowledging all of us that study law, when we start studying international environmental law, we learn that, a state is composed by people, territory, and government. And the advisory opinion also highlights what happens, if a state loses their territory, because that's a risk for Pacific Islands, for example. So they don't lose their statehood. They continue being states. So it's clarifying in so many ways. And another way that I would like Manuel to comment and connect it to the COP is that we know we are talking about an implementation COP here. It's many, many COPs. It's an adaptation COP, but it's also an implementation COP. I mean, it's a make your own COP kind of thing. But I also wanted Manuel to comment that, from this COP, we expect a global action plan or a global response plan to respond to the 1.5 ambition and implementation gap. So what are the elements, or how do you see this COP responding through this plan to ensure NDC delivery and clarity? And how can the ICJ advisory opinion help in that sense?
Yeah. Thank you, Fernanda. And thank you for now calling it the Global Climate Action Plan, because something that I think that we have to switch. It is our way of communicating what we are achieving, getting, adopting in this kind of venues, and then trying to transmit it in a more simple way to people. So, something sounded? Okay. Because people won't understand in any way what does it mean a global stock take. What's that, no? The point is, how can we tell people that the global stock take that we adopted in COP28, it's the global climate plan for the world, no? Because it is defining not only the state of the process, but also what are the challenges and what are recommendations for the future. So I do love to call it the global climate plan. So, based on your question, Fernanda, what this process is mostly suffering lack of? Accountability and credibility. Why? Because all of this process was created in a voluntary basis. What I think is fantastic, it's okay, voluntary basis. Also because the process never included ways to punish the laggards or those states or those actors that were not fulfilling with their own obligation. What I think it's okay. It's okay. Sometimes that approach, it's better than just to put sanctions, because probably that could create more resistance. So I am always saying the Paris Agreement won't sanction anybody, because the Paris Agreement does not include a sanctions chapter. That for me it's okay, it's fine. But with these opinions, we can create better ways of promoting more accountability, more responsibility, and more fulfillment of the obligation. That's my point. Okay? And in a proactive and in a reactive way. To be clear, what I'm trying to say, we have already seen, I am repeating, in a German court, not demanding the German government to raise ambition in their own NDC. Because for that court, before of this opinion, that NDC, it was not enough. It was too modest in their targets, and it was not clear. So with these opinions that are defining the due diligence, the duty to protect, the duty to adopt internal measures and all of that, it is clear that we can say through a court, you government, you are not fulfilling with your duties, and you have to enhance this NDC. And in the proactive side, I think that this opinion could contribute to make us more able to do these NDCs a strong public policy in our countries. Because let's be sincere, I used to be Minister of the Environment of Peru, that are used to being in charge of the NDCs. But Minister of the Environment are the tiniest piece of a big cabinet, in which the power it is in the sectors that have the money. The Minister of the Environment never have money, no? So the point it is, how can we make the NDC based on these duties more a top public policy in which all the economic sector, in which the Minister of Finance, among some others, must be part of. So I think in some way, because of this indirect way of connecting, these opinions, even the ICJ is referring to the NDCs, will contribute to that. Last point, always remember that it is not that the court will define case by case. The court is creating ways to connect. So if you go to duties and you look what is happening with the NDC and you look what is the cause, you can connect the three elements to say this is the way to push more the governments to enhance ambition, to be more clear in their targets, and to fulfill with their obligation.
Okay, all right. So I lost my questions here. Let me find
Sorry.
them again. Okay, so yeah, we are approaching the end of our session, but we still have some questions here. I'm just saying this because, you know, we want to incentivize the participation of you, so you can also be thinking about comments and questions and etc. to the panel. We're going to open very soon. But, you know, I wanted to talk about something that we also discuss in the rooms in a COP and comes up all the time, which are common but differentiated responsibilities. We know that's a principle of the Climate Convention. That means the one that contributed more to the problem and have more resources to deal with it are the ones that should, you know, be doing more. So my question to Anna is, how does those advisory opinions reinforce that, you know, historical emitters have more responsibility to address the process and that are held to address climate change, and that healthy environment is a human right? What does this mean for Europe, you know, in the context of Europe?
So, so the advisory opinion is really clear that the obligation is greater on those historical emitters, and the NDCs need to add up to action, right? We can put all sorts of lovely things in our NDCs, but if they don't add up to what we globally need to do to tackle climate change, then they're not going to be enough. And the court makes it really clear that each country has to do that. So I think that's really powerful. Of course. Oh, sorry, I'm not speaking close enough into the microphone. So I think that's really powerful that the court says that those NDCs need to be there. And we are seeing already some of this kind of biting in Europe. So there was a case before the European Court of Human Rights just a couple of weeks ago against Norway. Greenpeace Nordic brought a case against the government of Norway about petroleum licensing. Now, Greenpeace Nordic lost that case. The court didn't find a breach of Article 8, but what it did say was that petroleum licenses must be assessed as to their consequences for human rights. So going forwards, climate damage can be a human rights concern based on the advisory opinion, and the Norwegian government will have to take that into account when it's considering petroleum licenses. So those sorts of decisions seem very small, but actually are huge. And you know, today I believe is the day of health and climate at this COP. All of those climate cases are health cases. Every single piece of climate litigation we have is in some way a piece of health litigation. So they all link to people's human rights, they all link to people's health and the right to a healthy environment. And I think sort of making some of those connections as we take those cases forward and as we bring our advocacy forward is going to be really increasingly important.
All right, so now I want to check if anyone has questions to our panelists, and I already see two people. So first, you in the back, and if you can introduce yourself, please, that would be great.
Hi, my name is Anna Lima from the Accountability Framework Initiative. This has been a very interesting and inspiring discussion. I was wondering, Manuel says people from forests, he talks about forests, but I was wondering if this example of the ICJ, you know, to consider a breach, to continue to concede concessions for exploiting oil, could apply for countries that still allow deforestation, legal deforestation, in Brazil or in Canada, where they call it forest degradation. Could the court not consider that a breach, since we're trying to halt deforestation since 1994 as a planet?
Okay, all right. So Can you both try to address this, and then we'll hear your question?
So I'm not sure. It's very long. I'm not sure that the advisory opinion specifically mentions deforestation. It really looks at fossil fuel. But what it does do is say that states have to take the right actions to be able to meet their targets, right? And this is not just targets under the Paris Agreement. It's also these are kind of customary international law and the right to a healthy environment. So I would say arguably deforestation falls within that. And it doesn't only focus on a certain number of states. It really, the strength of an advisory opinion is that the court can sometimes go a little bit further than it would when it's giving an opinion on a dispute between two states. So that's actually I don't think we planned it this way, but it's quite nice because it can go a little bit further like that. And I don't see why it shouldn't be used that way. But.
Yeah, I do want to compliment. There is nothing more lawyer style than to say it depends. But in this case, I won't mention it depends. In my point of view, sure. And you know why? Again, it is to connect. If we have the duties to prevent harm, no, to cooperate, and all of those duties, due diligence first. Then we have NDCs well mentioned, no, and that is the way in which you have to reflect your duties. Third, you know, in our countries, in the tropics, the main source of emission, it is mostly deforestation and land use change and all of that. So if you are not fulfilling with your duties that it is related to your main source of emission, for sure you can sue the government and to say enhance your ambition, do something else, adopt internal measures. That is the way in which the lawyers are used to thinking. It is to connect dots as a way to move. And I am pretty sure that the court will, what is the word? Will be with you, to say it in a simple way. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, also as a lawyer, I think that's a good point because, the advisory opinion states that, NDCs and enhanced NDCs are a legal obligation. So if that's the main source of emissions in your country, of course that you can argue that, you're not fulfilling with the obligation of enhancing NDCs. And what is interesting too is courts interpret, cases and the law. So in this exercise of interpretation, creating jurisprudence, there is a possibility that could happen. That's a really good question. So you had a question too, please? Please identify yourself so we know who you are.
Can you hear? Now, yes. Thank you. My name is Wendy Ancieta. I am from the Peruvian Society for Environmental Law. And I have just a quick question. Excuse me if I have to read my notes. Just to
No problem.
I wanted to ask a question related to the IACtHR advisory opinion related to these new rights that they have developed, such as the right to a healthy climate, but also the right to science, for example, which was very interesting. They associated that with the right of information, having access to public information, for example. So my question is, what is the next step for governments, states in general, in order to enhance and guarantee or develop even in the national level these rights? Thank you.
Wow, that is a fantastic question. It's my former organization, so I have to say, good. So, look, 2 days ago, and I will connect with some other elements. 2 days ago, I was part of a roundtable discussing transparency and reporting. Something that it is so important in the climate debate, because it is because of transparency and reporting that we can know where we are and what are the next steps. So we started in the 90s with the national communications. Now we have the biennial transparency report. That's the title, no? The BTRs, no? And the idea it is that through the BTRs plus the NDCs plus the communication plus some other mechanisms, we can continue expanding the credible information to take good decisions and also to point countries that are not fulfilling with their obligation, with their own obligation. So probably that is the way in which we have to do that. No, because not everybody is fulfilling first with that obligation. So, and it is true what you have just mentioned, that ICHR, it is it has provided a strong argument related to access to process, access to information, and access to justice. That it is so interesting for the Pan-American, for the Latin American or inter-American world. So yeah, I think it is strongly related, and the point it is, again, how to connect, no? What are those mechanisms of reporting and transparency that must be enhanced as a way to have better achievement of our climate objective based on what the court is telling us?
And just to add to that, we're seeing globally that civic space, that access to information, access to decision making, access to justice shrinking. We're seeing it all over the world because governments don't really want you interfering and telling them what to do. It's not in their interest sometimes. And so I think one of the things that we have to do as civil society is really fight to keep that space open, because whether we're arguing about climate, we're arguing about biodiversity, we're arguing about pollution, we're arguing about human rights or indigenous communities' rights, if we don't keep those access to civic space open, we all lose out. And so that's something where I think we have to come together globally and really think about how we're going to try to push back against some of that. And some of that comes into this disinformation debate and the kind of rise of some of these extremist movements that will push back against that public information and public participation. So I think we have to really kind of tackle that.
And let me add something to that point of misinformation and disinformation. I am wondering how much this also could be related to IA, no? Because there is a lot of fear on what it could be the future with AI as a source of misinformation or disinformation. So, but that is something to explore. No, we the lawyers are always exploring the new challenges that we have to face.
Okay. Any more questions? Yeah.
Hi, my name's Claire. I'm a research student working on climate litigation and human rights from Australia, and I'm also involved in youth climate advocacy.
Okay.
I just had a question. I really like the sentiment that it's now up to individuals to kind of take this ICJ advisory opinion and other advisory opinions and use that to their benefit. In Australia, I think we're having a hard time finding like a basis for successful cases that kind of address individual and community climate harms. I was just wondering, even when success might be unlikely, is there still a value to pursuing legal action and drawing on the ICJ advisory opinions?
So we undertake legal action at all different levels, from kind of international, national, subnational, local levels in ClientEarth. And we've had this debate over the years about the value of bringing cases that you might lose. And sometimes you learn more from the ones that you lose, right? And sometimes even when you lose, you push the envelope forward. So if you take a case and you don't win, but you manage to get standing, then you've improved access to justice. Or if you take a case and you don't win and it's a terrible loss, you can still say to people, well, look, here's a problem. And there's a problem not just with the law, but there's a problem with the way it's being applied. And so then you can take that into a political argument that then you can argue for stronger laws. So I don't want anyone who's involved in international litigation to lose heart about losing cases. It's okay to lose cases. And I think there's a sort of strength in really thinking about using some of that on-the-ground local knowledge and bringing it up to some of these sort of really big international tribunals. I mean, that advisory opinion came from a group of students sitting in a room in Vanuatu, and it's really inspiring, that they managed to get it all that way. So, yeah, I'm optimistic.
Okay.
Yeah, probably the last point in relation to what Anna has just mentioned, it is even a legal case deserves to have a clear purpose. No, that is so important in legal strategies, because it is not only that you are starting by demanding the respect of your right, but also what is that level of precedent that you are expecting to achieve. So if the legal strategy is well structured around a common purpose, it could be more effective, always.
Anyone else? Okay. That's great that we are getting participation. I know, I'm waiting till the microphone gets to him.
Hi, thank you. Hi, I'm Matteo Bizzotto. I work for ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, and we work with cities and regions, everything at the subnational level, right? So from our experience, we see that most of the time, cities, regions, the subnational level tends to be much more ambitious and have much more forward-looking climate policies than the national governments. So might be a little bit out of your comfort zone, but do you have any let's say, any advice or what is your view on how the subnational level, cities and regions can continue, can actually move forward with their policies, even though the national government might be, you know, at best not interested, at worst, like we can see in the US, actively blocking it?
So it's a really important point, and we do see that. I mean, I know the European perspective better probably than other parts of the world, but we really do see that. There are a lot of cities that are much more progressive, much more forward-thinking, much less short-termist in thinking about how they tackle climate issues and environmental issues. I think those can be used as really good examples, and actually we can have a kind of global movement of cities and regions saying, here's how we're doing it, let's share the best practice, let's try and work on these things together. And there are some of those kind of global covenants of mayors and some of the others who are doing some of that really important work. And some of this sort of hard graft on the ground, how do we tackle climate change, how do we actually move the transition, is going to happen at that level, right? Because it's too much to expect a government that has been appointed for 3 or 4 years nationally and has all of these different economic imperatives to really make some of those tough decisions, but cities can make them. Yeah.
Probably it is not to complement, but it is related. What we can see in, unfortunately, several places around the world, it is a shrinking of the civic space. That is happening in so many places, not only in the US, it's happening in my country, it's happening in Ecuador, it's happening around the world. So yeah, I think that we have to see these opinions as an avenue to deal with the problem, no? Because those new policies to control NGOs by using cut of resources, cut of philanthropic support, and those kind of things, I think that in some way also could be addressed by using some element of this opinion. That for sure in some way also it is related to cities. So let's also work, or at least start to think on how to deal with the shrinking civic space by using these opinions.
Okay. Now we're close to the end. We have 5 minutes more. So just to close this fire chat very quickly, I want to hear from you one hope and one risk in this COP. And I think I want to start as well. One hope, a global response or a global action plan. One risk, that the result is a lower common denominator and we still have to say we got a good COP because we got something. I want something really strong coming out of here. Over to you, Manuel.
One hope related to what fortunately Brazil has already started, it is to see in this COP that the ethical side of the climate debate is growing. Because we used to think this as a political one and also an economic. But if we can add that also this is an ethical, moral imperative and an ethical obligation by using even the courts, I think that we will extremely progress better for the future.
I agree. I think my kind of hope is that this is the moment that justice takes root, and that the negotiators in the room realize that they have to take these things into account. It's coming whether you like it or not. You can discuss what you like in that room, but it's happening. It's happening out here. It's happening in the corridors. It's happening in the courts. It's happening in the real world. So that's my kind of hope. My risk is that those national authorities and the negotiators in those rooms have their blinkers on, and that they're, you know, looking straight ahead and not kind of taking into account the bigger picture. That's my worry. But I really firmly believe this is the moment for justice to take the center stage.
Okay, Manuel. Can I get the mic? So yeah, let me challenge someone in the audience. Shirley, one hope, one risk.
That was so mean. Hi, everyone. I'm Shirley from WWF. I follow the negotiations, and I've already seen the ICJ come up in conversation, so I would really like to see the conversations in the room that we're following to shift in some of their mindsets because of what came out of the ICJ opinion. I am also seeing a bit of a potential risk there, though, that we are really pushing some countries really far forward with what's in the ICJ. So I do see the risk of it coming up in the room and potentially, you know, making countries fall back a little bit because they're worried about the accountability. But that's just the way these things are, and I think we really need to be pushing for this.
All right, everyone. I think that was a great event. My thanks to the moderators and my thanks to the fantastic audience. Thank you. Not moderators, speakers, sorry.